Nan Rich is talking to everyone, and everyone's talking to Nan Rich except you.
Oh, I talked to Nan.
Talk about the strategy of not agreeing to debate your primary opponent.
The answer is the same as it was at the Biltmore. I'm focused on Rick Scott. I've got $100 million coming at me, and I think that I have to stay focused on that task. It's a Herculean effort, as you know. I don't think anybody's ever spent $100 million in a campaign in Florida. And I think the only way to have a shot at succeeding at that is to stay focused on it, and that's what I'm doing.
Don't you think Democrats deserve the right to see the two of you side to side, face to face?
Well, I think they have a pretty good sense of how we are on issues and what our views are, and I think that's certainly a good thing for them to be aware of, and we'll make sure that they're aware.
You're not concerned that you're going to be losing some of the women's vote, especially Democrats who see this as, snubbing a key leader of the Democratic Party?
I don't think so. No, I don't. I think they understand, frankly, what I'm up against and what the real challenge is here, and that the battle in November is monumental. And I think they appreciate it, and I think they want to win. And I think we have an opportunity to do that and help our state and get it back on track, and that's what I'm going to try to do. Some might have a different view. I understand that. That's okay.
Nan Rich says that she is the true Democrat, the real Democrat, which is an appealing message to the Democratic voters who will be participating on August 26th. How do you explain the dynamics of your political evolution from Chain Gang Charlie to a Democratic Democratic candidate for governor who is now about to or preparing to face down, should you emerge the victor, face down a Republican governor?
I am a Florida Democrat, and I'm proud to be a Florida Democrat. And I think that most of my views over the years are much more in line with today's Democratic Party rather than Republicans. I think the Republicans lost their way. I think it's pretty clear to most thinking people, at least the leadership of the party, in my view. And Jeb Bush said it better than I could ever say it. The Republican Party today, at least leadership, appears to be anti-women, anti-minority, anti-immigrant, anti-gay, anti-environment, anti-education. I mean, you go right down the line, and it's a mess. And I couldn't be consistent with how I was raised and my values and how Mom and Dad raised my three sisters and me, and not become a Democrat. I mean, I'm much more comfortable being in the Democratic Party. I feel much more at home. I always do. And as you all know, I mean, I've always fought for public education. I've always fought for the environment. These issues are not new to me. I've always thought that a woman should have the right to choose. These are things that I've believed my entire career. I haven't changed on them. I have evolved on a few things, such as gay marriage, but so has the president. And so is the society, frankly, and that's okay. In fact, I think it's healthy. So I'm very comfortable where I am, and very glad to be running, and hope I'm the nominee.
How are you going to convince...
I want my party to win.
How are you going to convince people that... Well, I guess my question is, you seem to be running hard for a position you actually seem very eager to leave. How are you, what are you saying to people as far as your real commitment to serving as governor of this state over the long term?
Sure. Well, first I got to win to be able to serve. And the reason I decided to run for the U.S. Senate in 2010 is pretty simple. We had done a lot in my first term. And the thing I'm most proud about during my first term as your governor was the cooperative spirit that we brought about, and the tone really changing in Tallahassee. It had been rather doctrinaire, frankly, under some prior administrations, and my approach is completely different. It was, I think the first meeting after I got elected was with Alex Sink. I went to her office to meet with her, to reach out. And then I met with Dan Gelber, and then I met with Steve Geller, the leaders in the respective bodies, the House and the Senate. And went over to the FEA building and met with the teachers union. I mean, my approach is very different from some others in the political arena. And I was very proud that we were able to bring people together, really not only have it be bipartisan, but frankly nonpartisan, as Robert Wexler described it to me, who's a dear friend. And so I saw what was happening in Washington. I saw the rancor directed toward the administration, toward the president specifically, and it troubled me. And I thought if there was an opportunity to maybe bring some of what we had done in Florida, in Tallahassee, and that cooperative spirit to Washington, that might help my state and my country. And so that's why I ran for the Senate. It didn't work out. That happens in life. Not everything succeeds, but having the opportunity to potentially serve Florida as Florida's governor again, governor with a heart as opposed to what we have now, maybe is a good thing. Hope so.
Did you feel comfortable as an independent?
I did, more comfortable than being a Republican, yeah. But I feel most comfortable being a Democrat. I really do. I have a dear friend, a guy named Mike Hamby, that I went to Florida State with. We went to Cumberland Law School together. So I've known him for years and years. He was executive director of the Florida Democratic Party when Charlie Whitehead was the chairman years ago. And he used to always tell me, he goes, Charlie, you're a Democrat and you just don't know it. I mean, you fight for the environment, you're good on education, you know, all these issues that we care about, social issues, I mean, you're there. And I guess now I know I'm there.
You know, we all remember 28 to 2010, but as a result, the current governor can say that when you were governor, you cut the budget, raised taxes, raised fees, et cetera. Things were very bad. How do you answer that?
Got us through a tough time. It's not easy. And I dare say if somebody like Rick Scott had been governor during that tough time, it would have been a lot worse for Florida. Case in point, he talks about the fact that I accepted the stimulus, the recovery money, as an absolute mistake is unconscionable to me. But I think it comes out of a doctrinaire ideological attitude that he possesses, and that has hurt our state. I mean, you know, if I hadn't taken the stimulus money, the Recovery Act money, we would have lost 20,000 school teachers. And Rick Scott thinks it's a mistake to keep them on the job and helping our kids get a better education. And I'm confident that, you know, people know that the global economic meltdown was not caused by me. They're smart enough to figure that out, and they don't buy that on the stump any more than you do. But I think we have an opportunity in this race to literally get Florida back on track. I mean, one of the things at the outset of his term in office that just stunned me was the rejection of high-speed rail about a month after he got sworn in. I was just like, really? Are you kidding me? Who does that? You know, a $2.4 billion infusion into Florida, tens of thousands of jobs that would have created, and because of ideology, he rejects it, and it would have just helped our people. And then when you look at the added nonsense, is my word for it, of not lifting a finger to get Medicaid expansion done, to help almost 1 million of our fellow Floridians have health care they deserve, I mean, it breaks your heart. I mean, you know, who does that? Well, it's Rick Scott is the one who does that. And with one election, we can fix that and have somebody who actually will work with the President of the United States instead of blaming him for everything.
You know, when we talk to some Republicans, you know, on the record or especially off the record, you know, their feelings against you really go beyond the political, it seems, to the personal in some cases. How can you work with a legislature with people like that?
You know, I'm more of an optimist than that. I know what you've heard and what they say, and I've seen it and I've read it. I also know that a lot of them are pretty decent people. You know, I've worked with them before, and they're not all zealots. They have to act like it in today's climate in order to be accepted or win a primary. And I'll give you an example. Last week I was in Tampa Airport, and I ran into, I will not reveal the name to get him chastised by his fellow Republicans, but I ran into a Republican leader in the legislature, and it was just the two of us in the Tampa Airport. No audience, no media, no show. And we had a very cordial conversation, you know, about the race and about how things are going and understanding what I was doing. And said, you know, if you win, I look forward to working with you. So I think it'll be fine.
Have any other Republicans or former colleagues reached out to you?
Oh, yeah.
What
Yeah.
did they say?
Well, one of them's working on my campaign for no pay.
Who's that?
His name is David Rancourt. He was Jeb Bush's deputy chief of staff. And he's a wonderful guy. He's a dear friend. And people ask him, Republicans, why are you helping Charlie? And he said, because he's my friend. A lot of these things are decided by whatever it is that motivates an individual. And, I think Floridians are concerned about this administration. I know they are. I went to Publix this morning in Fort Lauderdale, and I had a conversation with 5 African Americans that were working there. They just noticed I was there, and they came up to me. We had a talk. And in that conversation, like, you got to win. You have to win. We've already voted for you in the primary. They mailed in their ballots, apparently. And they're very hopeful, and they're very afraid at the same time. They know what the governor has done to education. They know what he's done to the environment. They know what he's done for opportunity in higher education. Starting a university where we don't need one because a state senator bullied him into it, or whatever that was. God only knows what the whole deal was about. So they're concerned and they're ready, and I think they're eager for change. And I'm excited for them. I want to help them. They need help. They deserve help.
I'm going to go back to one thing you said. You said that you evolved on gay marriage, like as the president did. You said because you're more in line with the Democratic philosophy, you said that you support a woman's right to choose, that you have always supported a woman's right to choose, even as a Republican, despite your party's general hostility toward that.
Yes.
You have supported a woman's right to choose
Yes.
as
I
I recall you
pro-choice?
saying you were pro-life back in the day. Did I miss the?
May I answer
Mhm.
the question? I am personally pro-life, but I have never interfered with a woman's right to choose. And let me give you evidence to allay your concern. Even as a young state senator from Tampa Bay, I took that position. And one of the first bills I voted on in the healthcare committee was requiring a 24-hour waiting period before a woman could even make a decision about what she wanted to do with her own body. I see that legislation in committee, and as a Republican, I vote against it. I thought it was an improper imposition into a woman's decision.
What would the bill do? Sorry?
It would have created and required a 24-hour waiting period before a woman could exercise her right to choose or not. And I just thought it was wrong. I was raised with 3 sisters and no brothers. I mean, I was raised by 2 parents who taught my 3 sisters and me to have respect for others and their decisions about their personal life, and that it wasn't for certainly government to tell people what to do in their personal life. And so while I have my personal beliefs, and what I mean by being pro-life is that I mean that I'm for life. And I hope we're all for life. And frankly, I think that the terminology that has been put upon the political world, primarily from the right, saying that they're pro-life, so almost implies that if you're not that, you're pro-death. And so I have adopted that terminology, but when I adopt it, I mean it to mean that I am for life. And I am for the rights of women to make their own decisions. And I've been consistent on that.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Of course.
So does that mean if you were elected in the legislature brought to you any abortion restrictions, are you saying you would veto any abortion restrictions whatsoever, whether that pertains to minors, adults, or anything else?
Yes, and I already have. I mean, as a Republican governor, I may have been an independent by then, but at any rate, in the last year of my first term, I vetoed the ultrasound bill on women. So you don't have to just trust my words, you can judge me by my deeds.
Several governors, more than I can think of, have said that they could accept the Medicaid funding even if the legislature didn't. Just do it and have the legislature stop them if it came to that. Do you think the governor of Florida could do that?
It's worth trying. For 1 million Floridians, it's worth trying. I mean, just to give you an example of something like that in a different sense that I experienced as your governor, in '08, we were approaching the election. Early voting was occurring, long lines, particularly here. Miami Gardens was almost ground zero with Aventura. I was witnessing it. I get a call from Dan Gelber about signing an executive order to expand early voting hours as a Republican. And he said, you know, you've been watching the news. Have you seen these long lines down here? And I said, yes, I have. He was Democratic leader at the time for the House. And I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. But I said, I'm not sure I have the authority, to your point, Juan. And so I asked our general counsel in the governor's office, I said, do I have the authority to do this unilaterally on my own, like accepting Medicaid? And he said, no, I don't think you do, the early voting executive order. And I said, why not? And he said, well, you know, the law in Florida requires that if you're going to sign an executive order of that type, it must be an emergency. And I said, okay, well, let's talk this through. I'm a lawyer too. We're a democracy. People are not being able to exercise their right to vote. That sounds to me like an emergency. And he said, well, you know, maybe you can make that argument. I said, well, we're going to make it. So go sign, you know, draft the order. I will sign it, which I did that afternoon. Nobody challenged it. And early voting got expanded, and we had the result we did with the election of President Obama. And so can it be done? Maybe. And it's certainly worth trying. But one of the things I would love to do is, if I have the pleasure of winning the primary and the general election, and get sworn in January, one of the first things I would do is call a special session for that purpose, for Medicaid expansion. Because it drives me crazy that we're not doing it. And I'll tell you even more so why. You know, we're opening offices throughout the state, field offices. And when I opened the one in Little Havana, there was a young man that came to our office opening in a wheelchair. And Luis was his name, is his name. And I approached him after, you know, we had done the opening and cut the ribbon or whatever, because I was curious why he was there. And so I got next to him and I said, what's your name? And he said, my name's Luis. And I said, well, thank you for being here, but is there any special reason you're here today? And he said, yes, there is. He said, you know, I'm disabled, as you can see. And I said, yes, sir, I see that. And he said, the reason I'm here is that my Medicaid got cut off last week. So I don't have it anymore. And you're my hope to get it again. And I'm going to try to hang on until November. But I want to help, and I'm volunteering. And you have to win, because the guy that's there now doesn't care about me or people like me. It's pretty moving stuff. It's real. It's not just Q&A in an editorial room. It's real. This is real too. Don't misunderstand me, but it's emotional.
You know,
Sorry.
you talked about reaching across the aisle when you were governor.
Yes, sir.
Previous term. And of course, that was to a minority party
Indeed.
that didn't have, that had a lot more motivation
Yes.
to work with you than the Republicans would have if you are elected. And
It's a fair
just to
point.
get back to Juan's question about, I mean, how do you, there are a lot of folks out there who are just loaded for bear should you become governor.
There are some. Maybe not as many as they profess to be. But to your point, there are some. I accept that. A couple of things. Number one, I will approach them, as I did the gentleman in Tampa Airport last week. I'll be civil to them. I'll look them in the eye. I'll be honest with them. I'll be transparent with them and you, and unlike the current administration. And I think there can be common ground that can be achieved. Can I borrow your pen for a second? For those that cannot be successful in approaching, if I win, I'll have a pen again. So there's, you know, a good approach and a little tough love approach too to this, to have the opportunity to hopefully convince people that we've got to do what's right for people like Lewis. And he doesn't care what your party is. He doesn't care if you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat and he maybe is an independent. He just knows what he needs and what the right thing is to do. So why don't we help him and forget about partisanship? The election is over. It'll work with some, it won't with others. But I'm an optimist, and I think it can work. I think you can get to people's heart.
Can you give us an example of a bold, new policy initiative you might be supporting that could affect people's lives and the long-range future of the state?
How about accepting Medicaid expansion?
Well, but that's not something you're proposing.
I am proposing accepting it.
Okay, but I mean a new policy initiative.
Sure. How about expanding our space program? You know, I was disappointed this week that SpaceX, which is run by a gentleman named Elon Musk, who also has the Tesla electric cars and other things, he's a wizard, decided to invest in Texas instead of Florida. Yeah, I think you know, trying to expand the space program would be important. And I don't know if the governor met with Mr. Musk or not in trying to keep that in Florida instead of going to Texas. I have met with him in anticipation of hopefully being successful in this campaign to try to recruit him to stay in Florida. And whether Governor Scott met with him or didn't meet with him, I know what the result is. It didn't work out, at least in the short term. Another bold idea that I would like to try to pursue if I'm successful would be to approach the president about something he tried to do for us before, and this governor said no. And we talked about it earlier, it's high-speed rail. I mean, just Medicaid expansion and high-speed rail, those two things alone would produce over 100,000 jobs for Florida. That's bold. And it takes, I think, a vision to be able to look forward and look back at high-speed rail and say, look, you know, to the administration, if we win, and we have a governor who actually respects the President of the United States instead of blaming him for everything under the sun, you know, if the federal coffers are doing better, because we know the money went to California for high-speed rail in Florida, any chance we could have a second bite at that apple? I think he would say yes.
On high-speed rail, are we talking about the same proposal you had that was on the table before, Orlando, Tampa, or something different like Orlando all the way to Miami?
Phase one, you are correct, was Tampa to Orlando, and the next phase would be West Palm, Lauderdale, Miami. And as you know, we're in the throes of a controversy regarding another train in Florida. And maybe now we know why Governor Scott, Rick Scott, decided to say no to high-speed rail in order to say yes to all aboard Florida. I mean, you know, when you realize that his current chief of staff, after all, was lobbying for all aboard Florida, at the same time the governor's being has to meet with the decision as to whether or not to accept high-speed rail, you know, it's not too hard for that not to pass the smell test. It doesn't. You know, there's something wrong. And so what I would like to see is the one that would connect all of Florida and not stop there. You know, we're tailor-made for rail, high-speed rail in particular. I think it was Mayor Bloomberg who said not long ago that there are 19,000 miles of high-speed rail on the planet, 0 in the United States of America. That's astonishing. I mean, I went on a high-speed rail from Geneva to Paris in 1991, and we still don't have it. Another thing that I think we ought to do, to your question, is alternative energy, particularly solar and wind. You know, we're the Sunshine State, and we are 18th in America in solar energy development. That's pathetic. And our policies continue to discourage it in Florida. And why? Because our utilities don't want it. And they like the current administration. Check their contributions. They haven't given me a penny, and they're giving him millions because they don't want to have solar. They don't want you to have a solar panel on your roof. They want to keep the same structure in place and have you continue to pay the higher bills every month. I pay them over in Tampa Bay too. So it doesn't matter if it's Duke Power or FP&L or whoever it is. You know, they're virtually unregulated under this administration and under this governor. He's appointing members to the PSC, the Public Service Commission, that don't regulate the utilities. Same problem with property insurance. It was an issue when I ran for governor in 2006, and it's creeping back up again because the leadership has a similar view of it. Rick Scott actually signed, I'm almost, please, a bill that said the Department of Insurance Regulation can't regulate insurance. It's like Alice in Wonderland up there. It's crazy. I'm sorry, Mom.